it's over for human doctors. AI is just going to be better. Took an MRI, took it to 3 different surgeons. Each one recommended something different. Off the same MRI, I'm getting opinions, not facts.
Vinod Khosla is one of Silicon Valley's most influential venture capitalists, a visionary who bets on radical technologies before the world believes in them, including OpenAI, Stripe, and DoorDash. He also co-founded Sun Microsystems, powering the early internet.
Human accuracy was 73%. AI, 88%. Then they gave the AI to the human doctors. They improved to 76%, but degraded the AI from 88 because they introduced their biases.
You spoke about the idea of the Tesla in healthcare.
Globally make mental health almost free. Globally make primary care free. Globally make chronic disease free. All these things should cost $2 an hour. $1 trillion of it is expertise, and expertise should be free.
All right. Okay, guys, just a show of hands, how many of you are students? How many of you are not students? And then how many of you want to start a startup? Out of all of you, who wants to raise from Vinod? Okay, here we have it.
Well, the other interesting question is how many want to do something in health versus non-health? Health and non-health? It's a broad audience.
Yes, indeed. Given that, everyone is here for the why is startup school, I think it's fitting to have the contrarian question around it. Why is he always preaches to do what users want? I think you are very well known about saying that the customer is not always right. So what philosophy should people follow? And maybe what is also your philosophy around company building?
Yeah. Look, with transformational technology, and I'm mostly like really transformation, new possibility emerge. And when you're asking people, they know what you incrementally need. In fact, Steve Jobs was famous for that. People would say, I need a bigger disk drive. But he was more thinking, what's the experience I want to deliver that's completely different? If you ask any customer today, when we invested in OpenAI, there was no demand for AI. There was no such thing. I mean, surprisingly, in 2018, there was nobody interested in AI other than academics. We invested the same year in fusion. There wasn't a single customer asking for fusion. So if your goal is to change the planet, you develop fusion and a fusion startup. If your goal is to serve a market, that's perfectly reasonable too. I love transformation. I love using technology to change the world for the better. But it's not the only reason you should be an entrepreneur. You can perfectly do it. Yeah, I always say there's a talk on our website that I first actually wrote up in 1986. It's called the entrepreneurial roller coaster, and many of you will learn when the highs are high and the lows are really low. How many have been entrepreneurs before? So you know about the lows too. And in it, I say, perfectly reasonable to say, I want to do a startup because I want to be rich. Perfectly reasonable to say, I want to do a startup because I want to change the world in some way. Perfectly reasonable to say, I want to do a startup because I want to be my own boss. I want to be famous. Perfectly reasonable to say, I want to just work with few friends. All of those are really valid reasons, and don't let somebody tell you what their reasons are. You should have your own reasons. So there are lots of reasons, but it's not always listening to a customer. You know, there's no customer asking for fusion doesn't mean you shouldn't do a startup. No customer asking for AI doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. And so it's really fun. One of the really interesting things, I suspect a lot of you are interested in AI. About 3 or 4 years ago, when we looked at what customers were asking for, this is after the ChatGPT moment, after everybody was excited, they wanted a tool for humans to use. If you're a software programmer, you want Cursor to help you in your IDE. We decided we wouldn't do anything that was a tool for humans. We decided we'd do workers, not tools for workers. Now, that's a fundamental decision because I thought that was much more revolutionary and humans would get in the way of AI. So whether it's chip design or software design or a doctor or an oncologist, humans can get in the way and they want to apply the old habits to this new technology. So you use 20, 30% of the technology, not 80% of it. And so we decided at Khosla Ventures, we just do workers, an AI accountant, not a tool for accountants. An AI, we did cognition, which was essentially a software engineer, not Cursor. So we applied this uniformly. And so, different people will do different things. Usually a tool is a lower risk, but much smaller opportunity that utilizes the technology much less in most areas. And now there's so many exciting possibilities. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So I always say, go back to your objectives. Be clear what your objectives are. I just want to work with friends. I love that idea, by the way, and I know lots of people who just do that. And don't let others convince you that you should be building the biggest company or something else. But it's perfectly okay to say, I want to build the biggest company. I want to be the richest person. I want to be the next Larry Page. But Larry Page had a very much mission orientation when he started. We invested in him very, very early. I was just talking to somebody from Google today, and I said, I spent time with Larry when he was in Margaret Jacks Hall at Stanford University as a PhD student. So, but he had very clear objectives. And financial wasn't his biggest objective. Anyway, sorry.
I think earlier we are also discussing about a lot of investors tell you what you want. A lot of investors are good to you. And then the question is, whose opinion should you take? Which person should you listen to?
My favorite topics. So the single most important decision any entrepreneur makes is whose opinion to trust on what topic. And on different topics, you want to trust the opinion of different people. Don't ask your friends. They'll have an opinion. The question you should ask is, are they qualified to have an opinion? And just because somebody's in a position of authority, they're a vice president of marketing at Cisco or IBM, doesn't qualify them to advise an entrepreneur in a new market. If you're doing incremental things, maybe they'll have some good ideas. If you're trying to introduce radically new things, their opinions are more likely to be wrong than right. I personally find, so if you Google, most investors add no value and 70% of investors add negative value. I really, really believe that. Why? Because they haven't built a company. Just because you get a job at a VC firm or get an MBA doesn't qualify you to advise an entrepreneur. You have very little empathy for how hard entrepreneurship is. I mean, all of you thinking about entrepreneurship, be prepared. The press makes it very sexy, very glorious. It is hard. And you have lonely, down days all the time. But you have to persist through that. So whose opinion you trust becomes a very nuanced thing. You really have to evaluate first, are they qualified to have an opinion on your topic? What have they done? Even the junior partners at Khosla Ventures, I tell them all the time, you have not earned the right to advise an entrepreneur. And you should think about that. And I think most VCs have not. A few have. That's sort of one topic, whose opinion to trust. The other part, and this is really bad for entrepreneurs, everybody wants great references from their entrepreneurs. That's a bad thing, because then they're nice to you. I always say a good VC should treat an entrepreneur like they treat their children. You don't always say yes. You don't always tell them they're doing great. You tell them what is best for them in the long term. And you give them the good news and the bad news. So one of the things when we started Khosla Ventures in 2004, I put a phrase there saying, we prefer brutal honesty to hypocritical politeness. I'd just gone through an entrepreneur who had a lot of money in the bank. None of the VCs would tell him the truth, that they were doing the wrong thing. So this team of 50 people, and I told them, but when they asked the other VCs, they say polite things. So this team of 50 people wasted 3.5, 4 years, took a lot of money, eventually sold for $3 million. Why? Because nobody was honest with them. And so I decided I'd never be hypocritically polite, which is what 90% of people do, even if they know what is the right advice to give you. You know, if you have a founding team, I'll give you my favorite example. I've done this a few times. If one of the people is the wrong person on the team, I will tell you before we invest, because you're good at one thing that you know really well, and mostly you're in learning mode. So you don't know how to judge people. And so you want people who will be really honest, as if they're talking to their children. I use that analogy because you always want what's best for your children. But the right answer isn't always yes, or you're doing great. Sometimes it's think about this hard, you may be on the wrong path. Or I don't agree with your strategy. Don't say it so politely, because entrepreneurs have a lot of confirmation bias. So if whatever you say, they hear it as confirming their opinion. By the way, I was just talking to Sam Altman. He was here earlier today. This week, we were having dinner. I said, Sam, your hardest problem is nobody's going to be brutally honest with you, tell you you're screwed up in X or Y. Like literally, I told him that. And he said, yeah, nobody says that to me. Like, where am I screwing up? And there's a great book by a woman called Margaret Heffron. I said to him, you should invite her to come speak to your senior management team. And she's given a TED Talk, which is the easy way to look at it, called Dare to Disagree. And she talks about where people don't disagree even if they know something's wrong. And then very often you don't know something's wrong, but you have a hunch. So you're not even sure of your own opinion. But if you don't bring it up in a group meeting, you can't discuss it. And there may be 3 other people in the room that are worried about the same thing. And very often when startups go wrong, people say, you know, I thought that 2 years or 3 years ago. And somebody else will say, I thought that too, but they never surfaced it for discussion. Discussion's always a good thing. Disagreement is always a good thing. As Jeff Bezos says, you want to have that discussion, then you want to have the team agree and commit or disagree and commit, but you want one strategy, and that's what the founder does or the CEO does. So be very, very careful. Margaret Heffron written a number of books along these theses. She even talks about why did with child molestation among priests, why did nobody speak up? Everybody knew it was wrong. There was just this, don't want to be disagreeable or don't want to cause chaos. Lots of big issues has happened in war decisions, in lots of big decisions, small decisions. So I would suggest you read Margaret Heffron's book on the right culture for a company. So I have very long answers to everything.
I love all of the answers, Vinod. I think you mentioned, speaking of OpenAI and Sam Altman, you mentioned that you saw a very interesting data point before investing in OpenAI, which was that a lot of young people and a lot of researchers were ending up into AI. Is this the secret sauce? Is this the way that you judge most of the investments? Or maybe what's the best way to know the right data point to predict the future?
Every situation is a little bit different and also depends on the kind of startup you're building. If you're building an insurtech startup, then it's really market-oriented. It's not technology-oriented mostly. In the case of OpenAI, the most important factors, when I went to MIT or Stanford to speak, what were people interested in? And I realized the best talent was going into AI. And talent's a pretty good thing because that says research will progress well. Then you look at what is the rate of progress. And there's two ways to look at it. I remember giving a talk to the National Bureau of Economic Research on the impact of AI. I'm not an economist, but they invited me to be the lunchtime speaker. And I said, here's the curves of progress. If you look at the curve, it's at a silly level to human performance. Human performance is up here, the curve is down here. So you'll take a medical example. I remember vividly, somebody joked that an AI asked an 80-year-old man if they were pregnant. Yes, AI was doing silly things, but you look at the exponential of the curve, you'd say, well, it's only a matter of a couple of years before performance catches up to human performance. So do you look at the data, or do you look at what everybody believes or accidental examples? No technology is perfect when it starts, and you can't let that distract you. You have to look at the fundamentals. Now, same was true. 1996, I invested in Juniper. It's one of the largest returns in venture capital. $3 million turned into $7.5 billion, 2,500x. That's pretty nice. But, nobody believed, because the telcos had all decided TCP/IP would not be the protocol of the internet. Think about it today. 1996, Cisco had said they would adapt ATM as the protocol because the AT&Ts, the telcos, were asking for ATM, which used to stand, for those of you who were around, not many, asynchronous transfer mode, particular way where every packet is engineered, not randomly routed, is how the... but you look at the data, and TCP/IP was growing exponentially. It didn't care. I didn't care what the telcos were saying. Said this is going to win, and so we bet on that, and that's why we got such a huge return, and that's why the world is in the right place. ATM would never have scaled. It would have scaled for a year or two. AT&T had a view that ISDN, or 64 kilobits, was all any home would ever need. They actually said that in comments with the FCC in their filings to respond to my comments about they thought HDTV would be 480 VGA resolution. Lots of silly things. So you can look at today and look at the incremental thing, or say, let me see where technology can take us, which is much more exciting, much more fun, results in much larger companies.
I've asked Virgilio from Sword Health that you invested very early on his company for a question for you. And his question was how much your contrarian mindset comes from your upbringing in India versus your understanding that it produces
I don't know. India is a pretty traditional place. Even when I was growing up, risk-taking wasn't encouraged. I just met earlier this afternoon with the president of Korea, and he was talking about what it takes to encourage innovation in Korea. And I said, encourage risk-taking. Make it okay, not embarrassing, to fail. There's a Harvard Business School case where the first line of the case is a quote from me saying, my willingness to fail allows me to succeed. Otherwise, you're not going to take risks, which means you'll do what everybody else has done because it's established. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and each of you has to decide how much risk and how much innovation you want. They're correlated. If you want a really big company, you want to take more risk and be more ambitious. But your probability of success goes down, but your consequences of success go up dramatically. And most people in business, especially VCs in a country like India, want to avoid risk. And so they're okay on a higher probability of success and lower consequences of success, which I personally find unexciting, but different things for different folks. But to V's thing, look, V was this is a healthcare entrepreneur, one of the most successful digital health companies. He was a PhD out of a university in Portugal, was trying to do this thing. He had been turned down for 9 months because everybody was judging him on the then current thing, not how they imagined where he could go. I looked only at V's learning curve. How fast was he learning, not where he was. And I said, you'll get to your goals. So, he'd been looking for money for 9 months, mostly among European investors. European investors have a great habit. I won't insult them too much, of turning every great idea into a decent one with lower risk. Any Europeans here? It's really true. They take every large, big, ambitious idea, turn it into a lower risk, lower consequence idea. Still successful, but that's not what entrepreneurs should be mostly doing. So I met with V. I literally took one meeting to say, we'll invest. And he was surprised because he'd maybe talked to 100 people the previous 9 months. And now it's one of the most successful digital health companies. He's just a great entrepreneur.
I think it's a key message for every European here. I heard you many times saying that you use ChatGPT to ask questions about medicine. And if they disagree with the doctor, you change the doctor.
So my view is most doctors, there's a massive difference in healthcare between the practice of medicine. I don't want to criticize medicine, but because you can look at 1900s, it was decent, and then 1910, 20, 30, 2000, 2010. Every decade, it has gotten better. So it has improved a lot. But it is the practice of medicine limited by what a human can know. If you're a woman, you get breast cancer. There's zero chance your oncologist remembers the last 5,000 articles on breast cancer that were published, usually in the last year or two. The volume of literature is so high, no human being can keep up. Then if you have that and something else, and your medical treatment is very complex. Most people don't realize, for example, with the doctors we have in this country, which is pretty good level, probably one of the best levels of healthcare in the world, we have more deaths from drug interactions prescribed to you by doctors than from breast cancer. Think about it. More deaths from that. That shouldn't be the case in the age of AI. So what do? Almost everything I diagnose on ChatGPT, and my son has a company in AI medicine. ChatGPT still hallucinates. There's ways to eliminate hallucination and all that. But the doctors don't keep track of everything, so they do the practice of medicine, which is what they've done before. So I broke my wrist about 8 weeks ago. So I broke 4 bones here, so there's a big metal plate in there. And I told my doctor, I not only want to fix the wrist, that was surgery, I want to increase my bone density. He gave me the usual answer, but not the best answer. And I said to him, why not this? He said, he went back and researched it, probably on ChatGPT, because I researched it. I said, I'd prefer that. And he said, okay, I'll prescribe that. And then I said, and I have very good concierge medicine. And I said, but hey, I did some more research, and there's this drug for women, only approved for women, to increase bone density in women. I said, why shouldn't I be taking that? No studies have been done. What is the mechanism of action? If you think from first principles, say, it should work in men too. And so I'm going on to that drug and said, I'm not risking another fracture. By the way, if you have a hip fracture at my age, your life expectancy is 5 years. And I had a hip fracture 2.5 years ago. It doesn't apply to me because of all the things they don't tell you, including not telling you what your mortality rate expectation is the next 5 years. So you really have to craft from first principles the best treatment you can come up with. And the AI tools are very good at that. I mean, I could give you 100 examples at that. I'll give you my favorite example. I'm probably not supposed to be talking about but what the hell. One of the best known names in traditional medical practice is Zeke Emanuel. Anybody in healthcare has heard his name. He designed Obamacare. He's a vice provost at University of Pennsylvania. Almost all the op-eds in the New York Times on health, they call him. And he's been telling me 2012 is when I wrote a blog in TechCrunch called Do We Need Doctors? 2012, long before AI was a thing. It was obvious to me it was the only way to scale medicine. And I happened to have broke my knee skiing, tore an ACL. I went to the dock in Park City, which is the home of the U.S. ski team. So they have the best people. Took an MRI, took it to 3 different surgeons. Each one recommended something different off the same MRI. And I say, I'm getting opinions, not facts. And so between that and thinking about scaling medicine, I said, I don't want opinions. I don't want treatment based on the doctor I get. I want treatment based on the disease I have or the ACL tear I have. And I decided AI would be the only way, and I did a lot of research. By the way, in 2016, I wrote a 100-page document called 20% Doctor Included. That was, again, before ChatGPT. It's 100 pages. A third is about what's wrong with medicine, a third about what it can be, and a third about the process of getting from A to B. It's a long, boring it's 110 pages that I wrote myself. But what was clear to me was AI is the only way to scale medicine to be the highest quality. And it's the only way to be objective because humans have biases. Back to the story, Zeke's been telling me for the last dozen years why I'm completely screwed up and don't understand medicine. And then last September, he came to me, he said, you may not be screwed up, you may be right. So me and my son are just publishing an article, I won't give you the source where we are publishing, that effectively says it's over for human doctors. AI is just going to be better. And so being able to convince somebody that esteemed, probably the most influential doctor in the country, hopefully this publication comes out, it's in a medical journal. And by the way, they were pretty hesitant to publish something this radical, but it will get published. I think it's clear the time is now and a radical change is possible on almost everything. It's the best way to do primary care. It's the best way to do chronic disease management. We have an AI oncologist in our portfolio. We have AI mental health therapists. I can talk to you about the caution in medicine and AI if we have time. But all of these things are now possible. Sword Health is AI physical therapist. So physical therapist, mental health therapist, primary care, chronic disease management, nursing care, you name it. These are all clinical functions that are all entirely possible with AI. And if you give them to a human, they do worse, they reduce the efficacy of the AI. So one of the best people in quality of care in traditional medicine is a guy at Stanford, Professor Arnie Milstein. How many people have heard of him? Probably the best known name in quality of healthcare in the country. He just did a study for complex disease diagnosis. They did a multi-center study. And for this class of diagnosis, human accuracy was 73%. Think about it. For complex diseases, 27% of the people got a suboptimal or wrong diagnosis. They used AI, and it had, on the same data set, had 88% accuracy. Then they gave the AI to the human doctors. They improved from 73 to 76%, but degraded the AI from 88 because they introduced their biases. Oh, I saw a patient recently, so I have a recency bias. This happened. Every single time the New York Times publishes an article on ADHD, the following couple of weeks, the number of diagnoses of ADHD dramatically go up because their mind is seeded. These are all facts. And people are not willing to accept how good AI is. I'll give you my favorite example. We have a company called Limbic Mental Health. And I'll come back to it's worth talking about the safety. They do mental health therapy. Their diagnosis accuracy for talk-based therapy is 93% in a study of 100,000 people. That's never been done in mental health. No human reaches that level of accuracy. But their AI can do diagnosis and it can do therapy. So mental health should be a gone problem. It is infinitely scalable at $1 or $2 an hour. Yet we complain about not having enough mental health therapists. So they just did a study published in Nature Medicine, which is a very rigorous journal. Their AI did sessions. Human therapists did sessions with patients. Then in a blind taste test, human therapists judged both sessions, not knowing which was which. They judged the AI-based therapy sessions as done by a top 10 percentile human therapist. So the AI therapy sessions were so good, they were better than, mostly better than 90th percentile of 90% of humans. That's the data. Let me take a little bit of a diversion, give you caution. We invested in OpenAI. I'm a big fan of OpenAI. If you use OpenAI to do triage in medicine, you get something like a 30% plus triage error rate. One thing you can't do, especially AI systems can't do, humans can make errors because they have insurance. AI systems can't make errors. So you get this error rate. But if you take my son's company, Curai, they use GPT-5 also. 5.6 now, but the triage rate goes to 0 because they built the whole harnessing system for safety, triage, verification, a lot of other stuff. So you can't use these systems off the bat. Limbic Health adds a layer of computational psychiatry which guides the conversation. So it's not just a chatbot. It's guided chat, and the result is producing a set of findings the way a human therapist would. Here's my findings, and here's my diagnosis. And that the computational psychiatry layer that any therapist would recognize and is trained on would do. So all of these AI systems in mission-critical applications can't be allowed to hallucinate. They need a lot more harnesses and safety and triage systems and others. And sometimes when AI can't determine something, I always say to health AI people, triage it to a human. A human won't do any better, but it'll be accepted much more as an error from a human than from an AI. So, anyway.
Vinod, for my last question, I wanted to ask you before we do a couple of questions as a Q&A. You spoke about the idea of the Tesla in healthcare, maybe the $1 trillion healthcare company. Given it's not here yet, which one, what's your prediction of the company that becomes that? What do they do? What do they own?
My bet, look, there's a lot of things in administrative healthcare. Lots of valuable things to do. By the way, for every physician, there's 23 support people in healthcare. It's a ridiculously high burden rate. So, whether it's revenue cycle management or scribing or EMRs, there's lots of overhead. And lots to be done to make a physician more efficient, spend more time with patients. I think the right answer is globally make mental health almost free, because the AI does the therapy. Globally make primary care free, globally make chronic disease free, make gastroenterology or neurology or endocrinology near free. All these things should cost $2 an hour, not $400 an hour. I think that'll be a breakthrough company. There will be more than one breakthrough company. I think healthcare has so many big niches. In the US alone, it's a $4 trillion spend. $1 trillion of it is expertise. And expertise should be free. In the AI world, especially in 2 or 3 years, especially with all the safety and other systems added on, there should be no question. Humans will have roles. I mean, I don't think in the next 2 or 3 years we'll do heart surgery with a robotic AI. That'll take the FDA an additional 10 years to approve. Regulatory is a big problem. They're doing a pretty good job recently, mostly because they're trying to compete with China in approving faster. So it's great for those of you trying to do regulatory approvals. There's a huge recognition in Washington. If we keep it the way it is, we will lose to China. There's all kinds in imaging, and about a fourth of healthcare is expertise of the 4 trillion. A fourth roughly is diagnostics and testing and imaging and those kinds of things. All of them extremely amenable to AI. Drug design is another fourth, or drugs and treatment, therapeutics. That's very amenable, and I'll come back to that, to AI. And a fourth is in-hospital spend, critical care, all that, where there's a smaller role for healthcare for lots of reasons. So a couple of cautions. The biggest problem is in healthcare is not having the best technology or the best AI. It's getting acceptance. There is no doctor who will use AI if they're in fee-for-service. Every time AI does a session, some doctor loses their fees. Think about it. So the AMA will not talk to me about AI doctors. Utah has some regulatory discretion. They're doing some interesting things. The American Medical Association is opposing the health department in Utah from allowing AI to practice medicine. So the AMA is totally against it because it reduces the income of doctors. Now, the big right way to do it is in capitated systems. For those of you who are familiar with capitated systems, or Medicare Advantage is a great system because you get paid for taking care of a patient, not for the individual services you provide. So look to capitated care where a person's income is improved, not hurt, if the AI does more of the sessions. So that's one general advice. I wrote a piece on it, I think it was in early 2020 25 on AI in healthcare. I talk extensively about how the billing systems and methods, which is incentives, change what technology gets accepted or not how good the technology is or how good your service is. So pay a lot of attention to that. And it's perverse, but unfortunately the truth. The other thing is, most doctors don't believe this. And so if you're building tools for doctors, they'll use it if they're scribing or other things. We're investors in a bridge. It's very good. We are invested in certain revenue cycle management companies. But frankly, the administrative AI is less interesting to me personally. I want to change medicine. I want to provide infinite amount of clinical services at no cost. Like that's the big enchilada to go after. That's super exciting. Let me go to drugs. How many people know GitLab? Almost everybody. We were investors in GitLab out of YC, so we were the first investors. Sid had 3 or 4 people on his team. Great founder. Company went public, worth billions of dollars, and then he got osteosarcoma as a public company CEO. And when he talked to doctors, they literally said, you don't have a lot of time, and there's not a lot of options for this. So he decided he'd be his own doctor, sort of like me. 5 years later, he's not only surviving, he gave a talk that's on our website at our CEO Summit recently called Going Founder Mode on Cancer. He's designed his own personal cancer vaccines. He's taken unconventional approaches like using 3 treatments at the same time. No doctor would let him. They would say, you don't know which one will work. And he said, I don't care. I just want one of them to work. I'll take 10 at the same time if I have to. So he took a very non-conventional but very first principle approach to treating a very serious disease which his life depended on. And he mostly just ignored doctors, and this talk is worth listening to. But we are now getting to the point with the help of AI where you can treat one patient. So I think instead of going through a 10-year regulatory process to get a drug approved, and there'll be many ways to do that. But the regulatory part will still be the expensive part. You'd spend $1 billion or more getting approval. I'm more interested in N equal to 1 medicine. If your patient population is 1 patient, and AI can design a drug and dose them safely, the FDA can't ask you to run a trial. So we are trying a new approach of what we call N equal to 1. So founders always find a way to go around obstacles. That's why founders are founders, and no big company will do this. So the encouraging news, there's many, many ways around all the large obstacles, especially in healthcare AI. Let me stop talking.
I think we have time for 2 questions max, guys. So, Vinod, do you want to choose?
No, I'll let you choose.
Joe, near you.
So you mentioned how AI can be used to provide customized solutions for each patient. But I think a big ask for many people, especially with AI, is trust. So for example, I sometimes don't trust the actual AI customer support rep. So why would I trust an AI, or how do you build that trust and relationship with an AI for them to take life-changing advice from an AI?
Look, humans will always distrust new stuff. Let me go back to AI example. People don't trust Waymo. If every human driver in the US drove as well as a Waymo, you drop the number of deaths by 2/3. Car accidents, there's like 45,000 deaths. We'd save 30,000 lives a year if we force humans drivers off the road and said everybody has to take a Waymo. That's also, by the way, about the same number of lives breast cancer causes. It's like 35, 40,000 deaths caused by breast cancer, yeah. But what's happened, in the beginning, nobody would even give Waymo insurance. Now it's relatively easy to get insurance for a self-driving car company. Why? Because the insurers look at the numbers and say they are safer. In fact, I read an article today in San Francisco, Waymos have far fewer accidents per mile driven than humans. So some people will never trust it. Some people will wait for others to trust it. So you'll go up the trust curve, and there will be people who will always experiment. And so it's going to be progression of trust in AI. But there's no question over time it will become more trustworthy because it'll become well understood. Other areas you don't have to trust, you can verify. In a drug trial or a therapy trial, it's the outcome that you measure, not whether the drug was designed by an AI or not. I think it was in 2015, 2016, I said, if any radiologist is practicing without using AI, they're killing people with diagnostic errors every day. And I got such a backlash. But the fact is, I think 2 years ago, the Journal of the American Medical Association said something to the tune of they're no longer accepting publications that say AI is better than a human, we just accept it now. Now, practicing physicians haven't accepted it, but our job is to get that through. Part of it is they don't get fees if AI does the job. I mean, out of that MRI scanner should come a diagnosis, not an image. The image should be the backup. And then the patient doesn't have to wait 3 days for the radiologist to read it, get the report to their primary care physician who gets it to the patient. But it's a slow acceptance period. People have started accepting ChatGPT. It's grown faster than TikTok. That tells me something. When you deliver utility, the rate of adoption never vertical, but very, very fast.
Let's do the last one.
Let's come here, over here, since the corridor is easier, and then we'll go across to you. So we'll do 3 questions because they're in the corridor. Sorry.
Thank you very much for the wonderful discussion. I'm building an agentic reasoning platform for critical care out of Seattle Children's. And for me, I feel that the elephant in the room in healthcare is Epic Systems, the key EHR vendor. And I'm wondering what you're thinking about the future of EHRs looks like, how and if at all is going to be disrupted, and what are the most plausible ways that's going to happen?
Yeah, EHRs is a funny story. How many people have heard of a programming language called MUMPS? Is there a hand up there? I'm surprised. In 1976, when I came to this country as a 21-year-old, I decided I needed a job because I had no money. So I told a hospital system in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, outside of Carnegie Mellon, I could program in a health record system for them. I'd never actually done any system before. And I programmed it in MUMPS on specialized hardware called HBO, not the HBO you've heard of. MUMPS was invented at Mass General. Most of Epic is still programmed in MUMPS today, in 2026. That's how bad it is. Now, it is so embedded in hospitals and systems, nobody wants to move it. So very hard to change systems of record. But those of you from computer science, I do think the system of record can be different than the working set. So in my view, think of it as a cached working set that writes through and reads from the system of record, but you never really use the system of record. So I thought that's what would happen in EHRs. But even better, an agentic system doesn't have to. Whether you're using APIs, which are very hard to do because Epic will control what you can do with it, but with computer use models, they can't do much about it. I think agentic systems will be the way. Essentially, the role of the EHR gets relegated to the background, which is where it should be. It's really good for billing. Most of the data is set up for billing, not for learning. So we'll go to the last question here. Sorry, we want to make it easy to pass the mic to save ourselves a few minutes.
Yeah, so from reading your essays, I feel like you're one of the investors who really cares about making the world a better place. I feel like it's not just a talking point for you like maybe some other investors. So I was really curious, what's your advice for people who are trying to do a startup that doesn't just make an impact, but really helps people in need, like helping solve poverty or helping solve global hunger, things that venture-backed startups don't
Look,
really orient.
I love people who care about that. But you have to find an investor who's compatible. Most investors are and have to be in the business of IRR because that's what they owe their LPs. They're investing their LPs' money, and they have a legal obligation, a fiduciary duty to deliver returns. They also care about that because their compensation comes from delivering returns. I think at Khosla Ventures, we define and we tell our LPs impact is as important to me as ambition, which I call IRR. So we are very clear with our LPs. I often will tell them if I had to pick between IRR and impact, I'll pick impact. As long as I can deliver them a rate of return that crosses the threshold they care about. I meet my duty, but then I focus a lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done OpenAI. Made no sense. It was a nonprofit. They had no product plan. They had no timelines. Same year, I did fusion, Conval fusion. And the Department of Energy told me you shouldn't be wasting your money because it's not in the next 30 or 50 years. And I said, fusion won't happen till somebody does it. Right? And in my mind was a very vivid example. I talked to all the automotive CEOs about electric cars, and they said not anytime soon. The Department of Energy, which told me not to do work on fusion, had issued a report in 2011 on the number of electric cars in the US in 2035, a 25-year forecast, which they like to do. And Elon Musk exceeded that number in 2016. So what happened here? Academically, if you talk to General Motors or Volkswagen or Ford, they do business as usual, incrementally, just do some nominal projection and say there'll be so many cars in 2035, and it's so far away, none of the executives will be around to be accountable for their view. Elon did something different. He said, I'm going to make it happen. And entrepreneurs, and this is why entrepreneurs is so important to society, these things don't happen. Entrepreneurs make them happen. Fusion only happened because I met this guy, Bob Mumgard, who was a senior fellow at the MIT Plasma Fusion Lab, and I said, let's just do it, even if everybody's saying it can't be done. And so entrepreneurs make this same thing happen. Same year, 2018, I also invested in public transit, and everybody looked at me and said, public transit for a startup? Like, how silly is that? I said, no, we have a much superior way. I'd actually written about it in 2016 of how to design a public transit system that would be far superior to owning a car. It'd be cheaper, faster, and more accessible to everybody. And I started with one simple first principle thinking. Every street has a given width. You're not breaking down buildings on both sides of the street. So public transit only has to care about one thing, which is passengers per hour per meter of lane width. Essentially, what can you fit in a bicycle lane width to fit at ease? Turns out there's a way to do it that's better than bicycles, better than scooters, better than cars, better than big public transit. It's self-driving public transit with small vehicles. You can fit the capacity of a light rail system if you do the simulations in a bicycle lane. So you go from first principles, but an entrepreneur has to decide to do it. None of the other VCs want to invest in it, even though we've now bid on 5 contracts, not invited to bid a single time. We won every single contract that has been decided so far in a public transit system from a startup because it's so compelling. So I'm saying for impact-oriented entrepreneurs, you can make it happen. People will not believe it. It's still hard to get funding for public transit in the venture community, but we have very good partners. And so you can make these things happen. And the world depends on you and entrepreneurs making these large changes happen. So go at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let me just say, I do have to run, but feel free to email at ovk@khoslaventures.com, and your email will be answered. Thank you.